y'all, and welcome to the Hillbilly Chicken Ranch. I'm Susan, I'm your hostess, and I'm so glad you're here today. We're in my kitchen. We are going to make homemade chicken and dressing. Now, my husband and I are doing a freezer clean out, and we found some chicken in the freezer that most likely will be either breast meat or thigh meat. And he also pulled out some boneless chicken breast. Well, the boneless chicken breast we're going to cook on the side. And these 3 pieces of meat here is going to be the base for my chicken and dressing. We are going to boil this. We're going to get it deboned, get the skin off of it, get the bones out of it, tear it up in pieces, and I'll show you what we will do with that later on. And we're going to keep the broth off of it. We are going to need eggs. And for my recipe, we will use a lot of eggs. You're going to use eggs to make your cornbread. You don't want the Jiffy in the box, y'all. You don't want sweet cornbread for this. You want regular, just plain old cornbread. We're going to use eggs in the cornbread. We're going to use eggs in the dressing, and then we're going to use eggs in our mock giblet gravy, or you can call it a no giblet gravy hack if you want to. And we're going to use a lot of spices. I'm going to get around to all of this. I don't have fresh onion. I do have fresh celery, but I'm not going to chop it up today. I've got some in the freezer. If you don't have fresh onion, you can always use the minced onion powder. And you want about a cup of this, and a cup of celery. I put turmeric in here because turmeric is a natural anti-inflammatory. It's been used throughout history as a healing remedy, and studies have found that curcumin, which is in turmeric, is beneficial for many health problems, including arthritis. So I'm going to use this, but it also gives your dressing a lovely color, or it enhances the color. I'm going to use some basic black pepper and salt. And I'm going to use some sage. And now this is sage out of our garden, and we ground it up. I'm going to use whole rosemary, but you can use the ground rosemary if you don't have this. I'm going to use thyme. Now I have whole thyme and I have the ground thyme. Either one of them will work. You can use parsley if you want to. I mean, these are, the rosemary, the thyme really are optional. If you just want a sage dressing, just put the sage in it. But I'm going to add some parsley flakes to mine, I think. And if you don't have any of that, but you have poultry seasoning on hand, use this. It really is that simple. So let's get this started, and I will get my eggs boiled in my Instapot because I want some boiled eggs in my mock giblet gravy, because that is a traditional southern thing. Okay, you want to make sure that your chicken is clean, and we wash everything before we put it in the freezer, so I know my chicken's clean. And you want about a half a pot of water, and these look like they are thighs. We're going to put them in here. And like I said, you can use any part of the chicken you want to use. This will make probably feed 6 to 8 people the way that I do it, because we like to have extra chicken and dressing on hand. Okay, y'all can see I've been a busy girl. My chicken's been cooking about 35 minutes on a low boil, and I'm just going to take it out and I'm going to put it in the strainer to cool it off quicker. In the past, I have stuck it in the freezer for a few minutes just to get it deboned. But I'm going to get this done in my broth. Oops, excuse me, I didn't mean to make that noise. I got a second plate out here to cover it, just to keep any flies or anything out. You don't have to do this step. I prefer not to, but today I'm going to. And because my celery is frozen, I'm going to go ahead and just dump about 1 cup of celery in here. This is about 1.5 cups in this bag, just to get it cooking. Put a little more in there, it don't matter. And I've already got my minced onions rehydrated, and I'm going to go ahead and dump that in here too. And one other ingredient I'm going to put in my broth is some butter. Now you will want to use approximately 1/4 cup of butter per pound of cornbread that you're doing up as dressing. And I'm going to guesstimate, because this butter is really, really hard. This came from the Amish community. So I'm just going to put some butter in here and guess at how much I'm putting in by the look of it. You can use a little or you can use more. I mean, it's totally up to you. But butter with broth just enhances the flavor of the broth, I think. I'm going to go ahead and put this other little piece in there since it broke off. And I'm just going to let that simmer for a few minutes. Now my cornbread is cooling in the pan. I'm going to get that broke up. I'm going to get this chicken deboned and we'll be back. And to break this up, I'm just going to use a couple of big forks and just kind of tear it up, because this cornbread is still hot. Now, if it was cold cornbread or cornbread I had in the freezer, I wouldn't have to do this part. And I do have cornbread I've been saving in my freezer for a dressing. I just didn't pull it out. And this is a buttermilk cornbread. It's 1.5 cups of self-rising cornmeal, 1.5 cups of self-rising flour, 2 eggs, and then enough buttermilk to make a very thick batter. And then you would melt some shortening in your skillet, pour off the excess shortening into your batter, mix it up real quick, and I use a layer of cornmeal on the bottom of my skillet with a little bit of the grease left in it, and the plum just falls out, as y'all saw in the pan. So this is pretty much broken up like I would like it. And you can make this with milk. We just prefer the buttermilk flavor to our cornbread. So that's broken up pretty good. I wanted you to see an easy way to break it up. I'm going to set this over here out of the way. We're going to start deboning this chicken. And I got the extra plate out for a reason. It's still hot, y'all. It's still very, very hot. Let me get a couple of forks.
my juices hot. I don't want my eggs to cook when I pour it in there, so I'm going to try to get it mixed into the cornbread a little bit. And that I will use my hands for. I'm using 3 eggs. If you double the recipe, it would be 6 eggs. And normally I wouldn't do the eggs until last because I want to taste it. But this is, everything's going in here hot. So we're going to do that. I'm going to rinse my hands off. We're going to start putting the seasoning in. And my hands are damp because I've been handling those raw eggs. So I'm just going to show you. That is a heaping tablespoon, kitchen tablespoon. And I'm going to put a couple of those in here. And maybe another tablespoon or half a tablespoon. I'm eyeballing this. But you want it to have a good cover over your cornbread mixture. Hush. And this is the thyme, and I would use probably about a tablespoon of thyme and a tablespoon of rosemary. So that's all those seasonings in there. Those are optional, and so is the parsley. If you wanted to use poultry seasoning, you can use poultry seasoning. I'm going to use a couple of tablespoons of parsley. I think it just adds to the flavor. The combination of parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme is just a timeless flavor. I'm going to use about a tablespoon of turmeric. You can use a little bit more. I wouldn't go too heavy on it because it does have its own flavor. About a teaspoon of pepper. And I'm going to do the same on the salt, about a teaspoon. And as I said, I would, before the eggs were put in there, I would mix all of this together and taste it. Now I'm going to take this spoon out and use that big spoon. And we're just going to start mixing this together. And I usually can tell by looking at it too if it's got enough seasoning in it. You can add dry breadcrumbs to this if you want to. My mother used to do half breadcrumbs and half cornbread. I think she did it because it was cheap, you know, and this is smelling very pungent. You smell all the spices coming together, and you can see it's looking like a dressing. Now I'm going to lift out the meat. And the vegetables as much as I can get out. And I could take another colander and strain this and really get all of it out. I may do that. Okay, I got all the vegetables strained out, but I want you to see how beautiful that broth is. It's got a beautiful color and it smells good. It's just really a nice broth. And you can always take your excess broth and can it. Now we're going to come down to the bowl, and you can see I've got all my vegetables and my meat in here. And I'm just going to toss this around and try to get it all mixed in together. Doesn't that look like a nice dressing, y'all? I mean, it's just really going to be good. And I'm going to start putting my broth in here and get this mixed up. Okay, I got all the vegetables strained out, but I want you to see how beautiful that broth is. It's got a beautiful color and it smells good. It's just really a nice broth. And you can always take your excess broth and can it. Now we're going to come down to the bowl, and you can see I've got all my vegetables and my meat in here. And I'm just going to toss this around and try to get it all mixed in together. Doesn't that look like a nice dressing, y'all? I mean, it's just really going to be good. And I'm going to start putting my broth in here and get this mixed up. I'm going to slide my pot over closer so I don't spill it everywhere. And you're going to use up the majority of your broth that you have made. You want this to be thick but a loose, semi-loose consistency. And you do not want to serve raw dressing to your relatives. In other words, you want to make sure that when you cook this, it is cooked completely through. And I'm just going to give it a stir. And I'm going to add just a little bit more broth. You can actually see when you push down on it, you can see some of the juices come up. Probably another cup will be plenty. And I've got enough broth in there to make a big pot of gravy. And you can tell it's absorbing that juice, but I mean, when you push down, you can see that it's got just enough juice in there for it to be loose. And because the way I did it, I didn't cook my eggs when I poured the broth in there. I did it slowly. And guess what? I'm using the same skillet that I cooked my cornbread in. You see that skillet here? I'm using that skillet. So we're going to move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to save that broth because we're going to use that in a bit. I'm going to move this over. And I'm going to start spooning this in here, and I may have to use another skillet. I'm not sure. But if I have leftovers, I could take it raw like this and bag it up and put it in the freezer. And then just take it out, or I could put it in my casserole dish in the freezer. Take it out the night before, allow it to defrost, and then have dressing. You know, have dressing ready to go. And let's see, I may be able to get all of this in here. We're going to try. And if I don't, I'll just use one of my small skillets. But you don't even have to grease the skillet at this point because the skillet was greased with when I did the cornbread. And we're just going to continue to pile this on. It is not going to boil over in your oven. You never believe all that cornbread's going to fit back in that skillet. Because it looks like so much, y'all. But I'm just going to mound this up in the middle. And we're going to get this in the oven. Now, I bake mine on 350 for an hour. I have done it on a higher temperature. I am not going to cover this because I like the crispiness of the cornbread or the dressing. I like that crispy crunch. And it's going to brown on the sides because it's in a cast iron. It's going to brown on the sides like cornbread does. And it's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. Get this pan out of my way. And I'm going to bring this over so you can actually see how pretty the color and everything is on this. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And it smells amazing. It's just got a really good smell to it. Now I've got a cookie sheet in my oven I've got to get out. Throw that on the counter. I dry all my cookie sheets and my cast iron in my oven. We're going to get this in the oven and let it bake for 1 hour. Timer. 1 hour. So we're going to let that go for an hour and we'll be back when it's done. Okay, to make my mock gravy, I'm using a can of cream of chicken soup. You can use a cream of chicken base that you make. A cream of anything soup base that's powder. And make this with some chicken stock and a little bit of chicken in it. And I am putting it in my pot, and I've poured off all my broth. I'm just going to set that spoon there, and I'm going to take about half of this can of broth, and I'm going to try to get as much of that goodness out of there. Now you can double this, triple it, however you want to do it, but you want to try to get as much of that mixed in as possible. And then I'm just going to slowly stir it into that chicken soup. And this is going to be the base of your gravy. I'll show you what it looks like here in a minute. Now this kind of gravy is a loose gravy. You don't want it real thick, but you don't want it real thin either. You want it to kind of sit on top of the meat. And the rest of that chicken broth I am going to put into a freezer bag and freeze it because it's really not enough for me to can. Now this has plenty of salt in it. I don't need to add any salt, but I am going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. I'm going to start heating this up. I'm going to get my
boiled eggs out. I'm going to take out 2 boiled eggs. And like I said, this is a mock giblet gravy. We're going to start getting this pulled together. And I've got my handy dandy egg slicer, and I use it 2 different directions to cut my eggs. I'll cut it one way, and then I'll cut it another way. But you can also just use a fork and break the egg up, or you can cut it up however you want to do it, but that's the way we like it. And I'm going to drop it into my soup mixture. And I just flip it, turn it around, flip it. And I'm done with that. I brought you in closer so you can see I've got egg in there. And I'm just going to give that a good stir. And it's already starting to look like giblet gravy with that. And I did pull off enough meat to get right at a half a cup of the thigh meat. And I'm going to dump that in there. And basically all you're doing is heating this through and your gravy is done. Look at there. Look how thick and creamy that is. And that is a mock or no giblet gravy. And this, I'm going to let it cool off completely. Then I'm going to bag it and put it in my freezer, and I'll have some chicken broth ready for the next time around. When I need about a cup of chicken broth, I'll have it ready. And this is just a really good gravy over dressing, y'all. And it's just a nice creamy gravy. It doesn't take any time to put together. So there you go. Okay, I'm using my homemade beet seasoning. I put some EVOO on my chicken, and I'm just going to use about a 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm going to rub down that breast really good, and then I'll do the same thing on this one. I'm going to flip it over and do the underside also. I think that needs a little bit more on this side. And I'm going to flip it back over, and that's going in the oven just like it is. I'm not even really going to rub it down. Alrighty, y'all. My dressing is ready. Look at that, y'all. It's a gorgeous color. My chicken's almost ready, and I've got sweet potatoes in the oven. And black-eyed peas, and some cranberry sauce, and that's gonna be our supper tonight. I'm gonna let my chicken go a little bit longer, and my sweet potatoes, and heat up my gravy. Now, if your gravy gets too thick, you can always add a little bit of water to it. You don't want to add too much because you want to keep that thick consistency. So, let me cut this open and let you see what it looks like inside. That's it, y'all. It's got a big old piece of chicken up there on the top. And it's hot. Hot, hot, hot. I'm just going to set it back in there. And I'm going to take a little bite off the side. That's not as hot. That's some good stuff. Now, like I said, you season it the way you want it. If you don't like a lot of sage in your dressing, don't put it in there. Make it the way that you like it. Make it your own. Y'all, this is just good. Look at that. It tastes like Thanksgiving.